The bells of the city tolled slowly as dawn crept over the stone rooftops, each note hanging in the cold air like a warning that could not be ignored. The square had begun filling hours before the sound of iron struck iron in the watchtower, because in this city, word of an execution traveled faster than any official decree. People came wrapped in cloaks and rags, merchants abandoning stalls, apprentices slipping away from masters, farmers stopping their carts at the edge of the crowd. The scaffold dominated the center of the square, newly repaired yet marked by years of use, its beams heavy with dark history. Beneath it, the ground was uneven, stained beyond recognition by what it had absorbed over generations. Markets were silent that morning. No shouting of prices, no laughter or bartering. Instead, there was a restless low murmur rolling through the crowd, broken now and then by a nervous cough or a whispered prayer. Mothers held children close, some trying to shield their eyes, others failing, knowing too well how curiosity could overpower fear. Execution day was not optional, it was education. Everyone was meant to see. Everyone was meant to remember. The wheel waited beside the scaffold, upright and ominous, its circular shape deceptively simple. To those unfamiliar, it might have resembled a cartwheel or some rustic tool. But the older faces in the crowd knew it well. They had seen limbs bent where limbs should never bend, heard screams that haunted sleep long after the square was empty. The wheel was not a device of mercy or haste. It was designed for endurance, for prolonging suffering so that fear could take root deeply and permanently. The executioner stood nearby, already present long before the condemned arrived. He moved with the calm precision of someone performing a craft rather than an act of death. His hood concealed his features, not to protect him from shame, but to strip him of identity. He was not a man here, he was a function. In his hands he carried the tools of his office, worn smooth by repetitive use, each mark on their surface earned over uncounted mornings like this one. When the prisoner was finally brought out through the archway of the courthouse, a hush fell over the square. He stumbled slightly as guards pushed him forward, chains clinking with every step. Once a man of influence, a moneylender whose wealth had made him both useful and resented, he now appeared smaller, diminished by the weight of what he knew was coming. His clothes hung loosely, his face pale and drawn. He scanned the crowd, not seeking a familiar face, those had all turned away, but searching perhaps for mercy where none could exist. The charge was read aloud in a voice trained for public declaration. Heresy. Corruption of Christian souls. Defiance of the natural order. Most in the crowd did not fully understand the words, but comprehension was unnecessary. Guilt had already been decided long before this morning. The sentence was not open to debate. As the final words were spoken, the condemned man's shoulders sagged, and a sound escaped him that was neither speech nor scream, but something in between, raw and involuntary. He was bound to the scaffolding first, not to restrain him completely, but to position him correctly. The wheel demanded a certain arrangement of the body, a certain posture of helplessness. The executioner raised his tool, paused briefly, and then brought it down with force calculated to do what it was meant to do. The sound of impact carried across the square, causing several people to flinch as one. The man cried out, his voice cracking, echoing sharply against the stone facades surrounding the square. Each act that followed was deliberate and measured. There was no frenzy, no anger, only routine. The executioner struck again and again, spacing each movement. With every blow, the man's cries changed, weakening, losing form, until they became broken gasps torn from his chest. Time seemed to slow, stretching unbearably. The spectators shifted their weight, some unable to look away, others forcing themselves to watch because turning aside felt like defiance. Children buried their faces while still peering through gaps in cloth. Old men stared with hollow eyes, having seen this before and knowing they might see it again. A few in the crowd nodded grimly, convinced that such punishment preserved order, that fear was the only thing holding the world together. The wheel was not merely a death sentence, it was a declaration that authority was absolute and resistance futile. As the condemned man was laid into the wheel, his body fixed into its shape, the sun rose higher above the rooftops, illuminating the square fully. Light revealed every detail the shadows had hidden earlier, leaving nothing to the imagination. The court officials stood to one side, robes pristine, faces impassive. Justice, in their eyes, was being served exactly as intended. The final moments stretched endlessly. Death did not arrive swiftly, and that was by design. The condemned man's breathing became shallow and erratic, his strength fading piece by piece. The crowd grew quieter as they sensed the conclusion approaching, as though instinctively recognizing the threshold between life and its absence. When it finally came, it was marked not by drama, but by stillness. The wheel stood silent, the body motionless, the lesson complete. The courtyard was already crowded when the iron gates creaked open, though nothing like the unruly mass of a public square. This was a more controlled audience, carefully gathered and cautiously silent. Nobles in heavy cloaks lined the stone walls, their faces stern, some masked by indifference, others by discomfort they dared not show. Armored guards stood in rigid formation, spears grounded in perfect symmetry, as if order itself might falter if they moved. High above them, banners hung lifeless in the still air, bearing the sigils of a house now determined to erase one of its own. At the center of the courtyard stood the stake, stark and solitary against the pale stone. It had been placed carefully, surrounded by stacked wood arranged with a precision that spoke to experience. This was not the rough punishment of common criminals. Everything here followed ritual, measured and deliberate, meant to convey solemn justice rather than chaos. Yet the smell of pitch clung to the air already, heavy and unmistakable, a silent herald of what was to come. The accused woman was brought forward under guard, her footsteps steady despite the chains biting into her wrists. She was of noble blood, raised among tapestries and candlelit halls, taught to carry herself with dignity even under scrutiny. Though her face was pale, her chin remained lifted, her posture rigid, as if defiance itself were a shield she refused to lower. Her crime, spoken only in hushed tones among the watching elite, was treason, an accusation that carried both political convenience and lethal certainty. A priest stepped toward her, murmuring prayers meant to prepare her soul. His voice trembled slightly, whether from fear, pity, or doubt was impossible to tell. She listened in silence, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the walls, as though the sky itself offered an escape denied by men. When asked if she confessed, she spoke calmly, her voice clear in the quiet yard, denying nothing yet begging no mercy. Some averted their eyes, troubled by her composure, for it made the act about to unfold harder to justify. She was bound to the stake carefully, the ropes tight but not cruel, positioned so she could not collapse when weakness came. The executioners worked efficiently, avoiding her gaze, already distancing themselves from responsibility. Around her feet, straw and dry wood lay waiting, lifeless for now, yet charged with terrible purpose. The guards retreated, and for a moment, the courtyard seemed suspended in time, every breath held, every sound amplified by expectation. The signal was given with a slight nod from the presiding lord. A torch was brought forward, its flame flickering obediently in the morning light. As it touched the wood, fire did not leap immediately. It hesitated, smoke curling upward in gray strands, filling the air with a sharp, choking scent. The woman coughed, reflexively, her composure momentarily broken as the smoke stung her eyes and filled her lungs. The crowd remained silent, watching intently, some clasping their hands as if in prayer, others gripping the stone parapets tightly. When the flames finally took hold, they spread slowly, methodically, as if savoring the moment. Heat radiated outward, felt even by those standing at a distance. The woman's breath quickened, her muscles tensing against the bonds that held her upright. She cried out then, not in panic, but in raw, undeniable pain, a sound that echoed off the stone walls and lingered in the air long after it ended. The fire climbed, feeding on pitch and cloth, transforming ritual into reality. As the blaze grew, the courtyard seemed to shrink, drawn inward by the spectacle. Some faces tightened with resolve, clinging to the belief that this suffering served a higher purpose. Others grew pale, finally confronted with the full weight of what had been ordered. The flames rose higher, obscuring the figure at the stake in shifting light and shadow. Her voice weakened, then fell into silence, replaced by the constant roar and crackle of fire. Time lost all measure. Moments blurred together as the flames consumed what they were given. The priests continued their prayers, though their words were barely audible now, overcome by the noise of burning wood. The guards stood unmoving, eyes forward, disciplined to the end. When the structure finally began to collapse inward, the fire followed, concentrating briefly before slowly diminishing, leaving only smoke and heat behind. When the flames died down, the courtyard remained still. No one spoke. No triumphant declaration followed, no relief was permitted. The remains were left as they were until duty demanded removal. Justice, like the fire, had run its course. The watching nobles turned away one by one, cloaks rustling softly as they departed, each carrying the memory with them whether they wished or not. Long after the courtyard emptied and the ash cooled, the air retained the scent of smoke. Servants would scrub the stones, officials would record the sentences fulfilled, and the castle would continue as though nothing had happened. Yet the execution left its mark, invisible but permanent, etched into the minds of those who witnessed it. It stood as a reminder that power in the medieval world was maintained not only through law and loyalty, but through fear made unmistakably real. Death was not simply an end, it was a message, delivered with fire, meant to endure long after the flames were gone. The guards stepped forward to secure the display, for the body would not be removed. It would remain there, lifted high above the square, exposed to sun, wind, and time. People began to drift away slowly, conversations hushed, eyes lowered. The bell tolled once more, signaling the end of the spectacle, but the image lingered. As the square emptied and daily life hesitantly resumed, the wheel remained, a constant reminder that in this world, obedience was enforced not by words, but by suffering made public.